So I've been playing video games for a good while now to understand some of the more challenging aspects of the medium. Yet despite all of my experience, I still suck at Dark Souls. No matter what you do or how hard you try, you'll just keep dying over and over again. And with the recent release of Elden Ring, these games got me asking one simple question. Why do you suck at Dark Souls? At first it does seem like a closed book. Game hard, you die, end of story. But there's actually a lot more to it. But in order for me to explain why, let's take a step back for a moment and allow me to give you an example. So you're playing Elden Ring and you finally make it to the first boss and you think to yourself, you got this. You start hyping yourself up, walking back and forth in your living room, preparing yourself for what's about to come. And when you finally calm your nerves down, ready to take on the obstacle right in front of you, you fail immediately. If you find this situation familiar, you aren't alone. Souls games are a little bit different from other games, whereas typically you move through obstacles easily as the game progressively gets more challenging. But in Souls games, the opposite is true, creating this weird effect where you aren't in control anymore. At first, this might seem like a bad idea on paper, but that's where Miyazaki and his design philosophy come in, giving players a world where they are subjected to limitations. And it's through these limitations where Souls games stand out, creating a unique experience that isn't seen in any other video game. But this video isn't about what makes Souls games special, it's about why you suck at beating them, and maybe how to overcome it. And the answer lies within psychology and a little bit of game design. Let me explain. When it comes to Dark Souls, there could be thousands of different reasons why anyone would be stuck. And when asked on how to improve, the answer is typically just to practice. And I'm not saying that's bad advice, but there's more to it than just that. The design of Souls games can be very meticulous yet expansive, creating a world that feels punishing yet rewarding at the same time. And even though this system works, it can be discouraging, especially when you fail over and over again. But what makes the difference between someone who gets stuck on the first boss over someone who can beat the game in 10 minutes? Ultimately, that comes down to mindset, and the mindset you have when you approach a really hard boss. Let's say you're facing the first boss from earlier, and no matter how hard you try, you can't seem to improve. You scream, throw your controller, but no matter what you do, the boss just keeps beating you to the ground. And at that moment, you think to yourself, this is useless, and that the challenges presented to you feel arbitrary to your goals. If this situation relates to you, you might be dealing with loss aversion. Typically used to describe gamblers or people who dabble in stocks, loss aversion refers to a person who hates losing more than they enjoy winning, constantly doing everything in their power to prevent a loss. Even though loss aversion explains why certain people choose not to take risks, it can also explain why people struggle to overcome certain challenges, always focusing on what they lost rather than what they gained. And this could help us explain why you struggle on that one boss so much. For example, a study done back in 2007 gave a group of participants some money and asked if they would take a 50-50 gamble, promising that they'll gain money if they win, but lose money if they fail. Some of the participants didn't partake in the gamble, saying that it wasn't worth the risk, while people who did participate yet lost felt worse than they did before, saying that the experience wasn't worth it. This study does a lot to tell us about how loss aversion affects the way people think, but it also tells us about how people react when they lose. You see, before the experiment even began, everyone had a perceived notion of what would happen during the gamble, aka if they would win or lose. People with a preconceived bias towards losing chose not to gamble and keep the money that was already given to them, while people with a preconceived bias towards winning took the gamble without hesitation, so when they lost, they started feeling disappointment or anger, even though they went into the bet knowing that it was a 50-50 chance. Each contestant all had plans of what was going to happen, changing their decision making and their reactions after the gamble. And this brings us back to Dark Souls. Okay, so you're back at that first boss, but before you even try your 50th attempt, you think to yourself, this is easy, I can beat this. And when you finally enter the fight, you actually do pretty good. You start learning the patterns, hyping yourself up, and just when victory is so close, you fail. And all of a sudden, those negative emotions of anger and disappointment start rushing in, and you start to wonder why you failed in the first place. Everything was perfect. You dodged the attacks, dealt damaging blows, yet it wasn't enough. But when you start your next run, you still don't improve. And even though this cycle can be frustrating, almost everyone has fallen into this trap at one point, doing everything in your power to avoid losing. But why? Well, this feeling has to do with loss aversion. You see, before anyone takes a bet or fights a really hard boss, your brain already makes a scenario where you win or lose, affecting the way you make decisions. And even though this can explain why people don't take risks, it can also explain why you hate losing. An article done by the American Psychology Association found that people generally have more emotional responses towards loss than gains, saying that the feeling of losing outweighs the feeling of winning. And this is true. Losing does suck, but sometimes we can get too caught up in trying not to lose that we start experiencing these negative emotions. And this emotional response can lead to impatience or aggravation. So every time you die to that one boss, it's not because you want to win, it's because you just don't want to lose. And sometimes we can get so caught up in trying not to lose that we start to become stuck, unable to move past the current obstacle in front of us. And Dark Souls knows this. In a 2014 interview, game director Miyazaki said that he's a huge masochist. And this quote does a lot to explain the design philosophy behind Souls games, and how to inevitably overcome its challenges. In case you don't know, a masochist is someone who enjoys inflicting pain onto themselves. At first that sounds weird. Why would anyone want to feel pain? But this quote makes so much sense in the context of Souls games and the way they are designed. Bosses purposely fake you out, enemies are behind every corner, and if you're not careful enough you could die within a few hits. It's easy to say that Souls games aren't a walk in the park for most people, yet there are people out there who persist and show amazing feats just for playing a game. There's something that separates players who stick through the entire game versus players who quit after the first hard boss. It's not good luck or the right mindset, it's failure. And I know that sounds basic, like yeah, you're supposed to fail. That's the entire point. But I'm more so talking about how the game teaches you how to handle failure and how to overcome it. And no other moment illustrates this better than the first boss in Dark Souls 1. A big towering brute that stands in the way between you and the rest of the game. And it's not like you're gonna beat him first try with your current gear. It's almost like the game is setting you up to lose, presenting a huge task and giving you little to no time to prepare. But instead of telling you to keep throwing yourself at the boss until you eventually understand the mechanics, Dark Souls takes a different approach, allowing you to run past the boss in order to find better gear and learn more about how the game works. That way, when you finally go back to face him, all of a sudden, the task looks a little bit more manageable. And this moment not only teaches you about failure in Dark Souls 1, but also for all other Souls games, saying that even though some challenges might look tough, you can always overcome them, no matter how many times you failed before, presenting you with a world that seems unfair, but with enough time, will start to become more natural. So when Miyazaki says he's a huge masochist, he's talking about how failure can be a key to success. So let's go back to the very first example. You're still stuck on the same boss for what feels like a century. You've watched YouTube video guides, looked up the best strategies, but nothing works. And as you sit there alone in your room, staring at the game over screen, something clicks. And instead of rushing in, hoping for the perfect run, you become more patient. You take a deep breath, calm your nerves, maybe get a nice glass of cool water, and then you're back at it, hoping that this run is the run, that you can finally show that big scary demon who's boss. And you know what? You still fail. But it's okay, because instead of getting mad or feeling insecure about your own abilities, you stay calm, knowing that despite all of your failures, you got this.